So God, we just ask you pour out your favor in this house today. God, you pour out your favor wherever people are watching online, anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. God, we ask that you would pour out your spirit in this place. God, thank you for making yourself available to us. God, we make ourselves available to you today. God, we really believe that what the prophet Jeremiah said, that if we'll seek you with our whole heart, that we will find you. And so today, God, we eliminate distractions from this place, distractions from our lives. God, I know we got a lot of things going on, but for the next few minutes, God, can we just focus on you, hearing you and seeing you for who you are? And so God, move in this place today. Do the impossible. Break the stronghold, break the addiction. God, I pray that we would leave different than we came in. God, only you can change a heart. We love you. And in Jesus' mighty name, everybody said, amen. Hey, say hi to somebody before you sit down. Give them a handshake, high five, air high five, whatever you want. Hey, well, can we just welcome all of our first-time guests in the room who are joining us today in person and online. Thank you guys so much for being here. Hey, while I'm talking in the next few minutes, under your seats, there's a Connect card. I'd love to just get the opportunity to know you, pray for you. Our church would just love to connect with you. So if you will, while I'm talking, you're not gonna bug me or interrupt me, but I would just love for you to take the time to fill out that Connect card, and it's just our way of wanting to get to know you better. We're not gonna sign you up for Christian Mingle, okay, or anything like that. We wanna get to connect with you, and so I just really believe that God is gonna move today, and I just want you to know, if it's your first time here, this really is a church you can belong before you believe. And I just want you to know you're welcome here. No matter what your past is, no matter if you haven't been in church in your entire life or 10 years, this is a house, this is a place that you're welcome. And I'm just believing that like God is gonna move, but please understand, I'm not gonna stand up here and tell you that the problems you had in 2020 won't follow you to 2021. Just because it's a new year doesn't mean it's a new you. And as much as I would love to tell you that, the truth is just because it clicked over to January 1st doesn't mean the habits you had last year just disappear. And that's why in week 1 of this series, we talked about the healthy habits that you and I are called to develop. And so I asked an important question: what's the habit that you need to start today that your future self will thank you for tomorrow? And the whole premise of this series isn't just for us to focus on the future, right? But it's to focus on who we are becoming today so that your future self will thank you tomorrow. And last week we talked about how to use our time, that our future self will thank us for the time that we didn't waste. So what are you doing with your time? That was week 2. And on that topic of time, I don't want to waste any time. Y'all ready to dive into the word today? Okay, come on somebody. Listen, I've been preaching to a camera by itself for the past couple of weeks. Listen, I don't need your affirmation, I want your participation, all right? So here's the deal, I'm just gonna go ahead and help you this. So if there's a moment in the message you feel like saying amen, or you feel like saying that's good, or you feel like saying that was for me, or you wanna turn to your neighbor and say that was for you, or you wanna say preach it white boy, whatever you got, I just want you to give it to me. So listen, on the count of 3, I want you to just shout me down on the count of 3. It's so loud that the people online hear me. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Come on, somebody. There we go. Good. Y'all ready to dive in? Hey, I'm super excited about it. And we're going to be talking about this concept today, that your future self will thank you for the relationships that you chose. For the relationships that you chose. And so today, I really want to help you choose relationships today so that your future self will thank you for them tomorrow. And if anything I've learned in the past year, it's that I desperately need relationships. Anybody else? I desperately need, let me be more specific, godly relationships. And I'm so thankful for the godly relationships in my life, because without them, I wouldn't be standing here today. And I think the same is true for you, right? I remember talking to one of my mentors a couple weeks ago, and he said, hey, Kody, how would you describe 2020? Oh, that's a hard question. Hell, I don't know. No, sorry, can I say that? He asked, how would you describe it? What did God teach you? What did God teach you about your relationship with him? What did he teach you about your relationship with other people, about the church? Like, what was kind of the thread? Was there a thread throughout all of 2020? How would you describe it? And I think that's a great question. And I was able to come up with one word that described the whole thing. My relationship with my family, my spouse, with God, with you, as a church, as a leader. There's one word that I described 2020, and it's real simple: roller coaster. Anybody with me? How many of you love roller coasters? Raise your hand. How many of you hate roller coasters and have never been on them? Okay, so for me, like I used to love roller coasters. Like as a kid, theme parks were my jam. How many of you remember Kentucky Kingdom? I think they're back. They're not very good no more, but I used to love going to Six Flags. How many remember Opryland? Come on now, there we go. Now I got some Nashvillians in the house. I used to love rides. I wasn't afraid of anything. My favorite ride at Opryland was the Hangman. It was awesome. I loved it. I wasn't care of the loops and the turns and the unexpected moments, but I just feel like 2020 was full of those. It was full of highs, it was full of lows, it was full of these moments you're excited about, these moments that caught you and spun you for a loop, right? Like that's how I would describe 2020. And what I did as I got older, I guess, I started to not like roller coasters as much because I saw the YouTube videos where people died on them. And so I started playing the game, like, is it worth it game? Got 2 kids now, like, is it worth it? Like it looks really, is it worth it? Or like the what if game, it's like, what if that happens? Like, do my kids really want to grow up without a dad? No, of course not. So like, I'm just more skeptical about getting on roller coasters. And that's just how I would describe it, that 2020 was a roller coaster. That there was just things about it that I really loved, but there was also things about it that I really hated. And the thread that I got from the whole year was this need that I desperately needed godly relationships. And it's funny to me because I think there's some Christians that will say this. Maybe you've said it. I know I've said it. That will say things that sound really good. Like, oh, well, all I need is Jesus. No, you don't. God disagrees with you. Here's why. See, you're called to follow Jesus for yourself, not by yourself. Like, you're called to follow Jesus for yourself. It's your responsibility. It's your choice. But you're not called to follow Jesus by yourself because God is a relational God. And if God is a relational God, he created us as relational people. And so in the very beginning, the first problem in the Bible wasn't sin. The first problem in the Bible was solitude. Right? Like the first not good God gave wasn't when Eve ate the apple or the peach or whatever it is. I believe it was a mango. Love mangoes. That wasn't the first problem. The first not good he gave was what? For man to be alone. Solitude. The idea that you don't need people, all I need is, it's not true. It sounds good, but you need relationships. You desperately need godly relationships speaking into your life. And so what happens in that moment is that he creates Eve to come along as a companion, as a helper for Adam. And then you know the rest of the story. The serpent comes and tempts him, and Adam is standing passively next to his wife, and she eats the mango or whatever it is, and sin enters into the world. Now, what you need to understand in that moment, not only was the relationship severed between man and God, the vertical relationship, but it was also severed between each other, the horizontal relationship. And so when Jesus came to earth, it wasn't just to redeem you and bring you back into right relationship with God. It was also to redeem you and bring you back into right relationship with people. And so it's not just, I got my personal relationship with God. That's great. But Jesus would say, like, if you hate your neighbor and claim that you love me, you're lying. Because you can't love God and not love people. And so he created you and I for relationships. And I love this idea that A.W. Tozer gives. He says that you are the company that you keep. That you and I, if you want to become all God has called you to be, it's important that you understand, I agree with him, that you are the company that you keep. I would travel across the country and preach to youth all the time, and one of the things I would tell them is I would say, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. That the 5 closest relationships to you now, I will be able to predict in 5 years where you will be in the same relationship. Because your friends really matter. Who you do life with matters. And the relationships you choose today shape who you become tomorrow. The relationships in your life right now, your inner circle of people shape who you are becoming tomorrow. Somebody said, check your circle. Turn to your neighbor, tell them, check your circle. What do I mean by that? What I'm saying is it's time for you and I to take an honest look and audit of our relationships. Because they shape who you are becoming. So 3 questions you want to ask yourself as you do this is, what kind of friends do you have? What kind of friends do you want? And what kind of friend are you? What kind of friends do you have? What kind of friends do you want? And what kind of friend are you? Because the truth is you aren't called to bring everyone into your inner circle. Everyone doesn't get the private parts of your life. There's different levels of intimacy that you and I are to experience with people. Now, I'm not saying not to love people. Because some of you are like, oh, what do you mean? Like, I'm supposed to love everybody. Yeah, but there's a difference in helping people and saving people, and you can't save people. Like, you can help people. It's your job to help people get to Jesus, but just understand only he can change their heart. And so not everyone in your life is good for you. Not everyone in your life needs to be in your circle. This is why it says in Proverbs 13, walk with the wise and become wise. For a companion of fools suffers harm. Are your friends, are they wise or are they foolish? Here's the best way to find out really quickly. Do you make wise decisions or do you make foolish ones? Because if you, come on now, Brandon, talking to him up there. If you want to experience what God has for you and you're not making wise decisions, the best thing you can do is you can take an audit of, are the friends you're making wise decisions or poor ones? Are you making wise decisions or poor ones? So not everyone gets this access. Here's what I wrote down. Love is given, access is granted. See, Jesus, listen, he loved the world. Don't get me wrong. He loved the world. He was a friend of sinners. What a great nickname. He was a friend of sinners. But even Jesus picked 12. And even within that 12, he had an inner circle of 3. Maybe the reason some of us continue to get hurt is because you're given access to the wrong people in your life. Not everybody needs access to the deepest parts of you. So love is freely given, but access is granted. And so you and I need to take an audit of our relationships. That's why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. The quickest way to get rid of your bad character is to get rid of your bad company. Maybe the reason why some of us have such a hard time finishing things that we say we're gonna start, maybe the reason why we tend to set the same goals every single year, it's not because you're not gifted, it's not because God hasn't anointed you and called you. Maybe the reason for some of us we can't obtain those goals that we set in public is because we don't have the character to sustain it in private. And the reason we don't have the character to sustain it in private is because who we're hanging out in private is corrupting our character. So you and I, we need to make sure that we're looking around, and this is why he also says in 2 Corinthians next, he says, do not be yoked together with unbelievers. This isn't just about marriage. This is about relationships. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? Now, this is an agricultural term. Any farmers in the house? Oh, one. Come on, somebody. I didn't think so. There's always one. But here's the deal. A lot of us don't understand the idea of a yoke. And what a yoke was it was this wooden thing that they would put around the necks of 2 oxen. And what they would do is it was important that they were equally yoked. They were able to pull the same amount of weight, and they would never put a strong ox with a weak ox, because if they did, they would find themselves zigzagging and couldn't do a crop line. Or they would just walk in circles. Because one's stronger and one's weaker. This is the idea that you and I aren't supposed to be yoked up with people who aren't living out their purpose that God has given them. And maybe the reason why some of us aren't making progress the way we thought we would is because you keep walking in circles because of the company you're keeping. You're unequally yoked. Now, I'm not talking to you married people when you're like, well, I'm a believer, my husband's an unbeliever. Different conversation. That don't mean you get to just, I'm out. That's not how it works. You're called to stick it out. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you about the type of friends you don't want in your inner circle. Now, again, I'm talking about access here. I'm not talking about not loving people. Hear me clearly. But there's some friends that Scripture gives. The book of Proverbs, as I read through it this day, I just went through a list. And some of them are going to be really obvious and they're funny, but it's true, because the truth is, y'all, some of us got these people in our inner circle, and it's time to do an audit. And so here's just a couple that you don't want in your inner circle. The first one is thieves and murderers. Write that down. Proverbs 1:13-15. I'm telling you, listen, I used to read this to my high schoolers all the time, especially when I was in Memphis doing inner city ministry. Here's what it says. Don't be tempted by sinners, or listen when they say, come on, let's gang up and kill somebody just for the fun of it. They're well and healthy now, but we'll finish them off once and for all. We'll take their valuables, fill our homes with stolen goods. If you join our gang, you'll get your share. Don't follow anyone like that or do what they do. That's a wise word from Proverbs 1. Here's the other person you don't want in your circle. People who like to argue. Uh-oh. Proverbs 20, verse 3. Any fool can start arguments, the honorable things to stay out of them. People who gossip. Y'all don't like this one today. Proverbs 20:19, stay away from gossips. They can't keep a secret and they tell everything. Just like your mom always said, if they're talking to you, they're also talking about you. Stay away from gossips. You don't want them in your inner circle. People who lack self-control, who are easily angered, can't control their temper. Proverbs 22, don't make friends with a hot-tempered person. Don't associate with anyone easily angered, or you'll learn to be like them and not be able to change. I wonder if the reason you can't control your mouth is because you're around people who can't control theirs. People who flatter you, this is a big one. If you're a teenager in the room, listen up. People who tell you things that you want to hear all the time, but won't tell you the truth. Proverbs 29, flattery is a trap. Say trap. Evil people get caught in it, but good people avoid it and are free. I love another proverb. It says, wounds from a friend are better than kisses from an enemy. It's better for a friend to be honest with you than for an enemy to continually to kiss your butt and make you feel good about yourself. Okay, so friends you don't want in your inner circle, let me give you a couple real quick, write them down, of friends you do want in your inner circle. You want friends who are gonna encourage you spiritually. You want godly relationships that will encourage you spiritually. 1 Thessalonians 5 says, encourage one another and build each other up. There's an incredible story, one of my favorites of all time in Mark chapter 2. Where this guy is paralyzed and Jesus comes into town and begins preaching. The place packs out, there's no room for him, and he's got 4 friends who decides to come over, pick this guy up on his mat, take him to the house. They don't just stop when they see it's crowded. Instead, they go up on the roof, rip a hole through the roof, lower him down just to get him to Jesus. You need some friends like that will do anything it takes to get you in the presence of God. It may be a physical need, it may be a spiritual need. You need some friends who are gonna encourage you spiritually. Here's the second one. You need some friends who are gonna challenge you mentally. What I mean by that is that you need friends who are gonna challenge the way that you think. If you're the smartest person in your circle, you need a new circle. Just telling you. Why? A companion of fools suffers much harm. So you need somebody who's gonna encourage you spiritually, challenge you mentally. You need somebody who's gonna be present with you and support you emotionally. You need somebody that when you're down, that when you're out and you feel like quitting, isn't gonna just tell you how to fix the problem, but will learn how to sit in silence with you and just weep with you. I'm so thankful I have people who, when I'm really going through some things, don't just tell me to trust God more, but just sit there with me and be present with me. You need some friends who are gonna support you emotionally. You need some friends that's gonna help you physically. Come on, somebody. If you gotta move houses from an apartment to a house, you need some friends who will help you physically. Proverbs also says 2 is better than 1. Pity a man who falls alone but has nobody to help him up. For some of us, like we experience things in life where we physically feel like we can't go on and we fall to the ground, and you need somebody to come into your life and not let you sit there thinking life is over, but physically pick you back up and tell you to keep going. And here's the last one, the 5th friend. I told you, your 5 friends will shape your 5 years. You need somebody who's gonna know you intimately. And I just wanna pause here for a second because we live in an age of shallow relationships. You need somebody who knows you intimately. There's some great books about the different levels of intimacy that I don't have time to go into today. But I don't know if you know this, the deepest level of intimacy isn't physical. It may be the one people go to first, but it ain't the deepest. It's to actually share what's really going on, the needs you have in your life. You need somebody who knows you, the real you. The real you. And so, what does that mean for today? Well, you can do everything I've said thus far perfectly, and your relationships still won't be perfect. And I would be lying to you to say, okay, guys, amen, have a good week. If you do everything I said, your relationships are gonna go great. Because you know what I found out? Just like 2020, that relationships are like roller coasters. There's moments you love, there's moments you hate. There's things that make you sick, that make you want to throw up. There's moments that you enjoy and you look out and you're like, this is awesome. And then the next moment, all of a sudden something happens. And you're like, I didn't even see that coming. And you're walking around dizzy, like how in the world how could they do that? And so what I want to do is I want to prepare you for what's going to happen in your life when you pursue godly relationships. Because this is true. And here's how I know. Because even if you were perfect, your relationship still won't be, because all you got to do is look at Jesus and the types of relationships he had. Jesus had relationships that were roller coasters, specifically with a guy named Peter, who was in his inner circle, was his best friend. Jesus had an inner circle of 3, Peter, James, and John. And so what I want to do is I just want to kind of take you through a storyline, a roller coaster, if you per se, on the relationship between Jesus and Peter, because I think there's some things that you and I can relate to. And so what I want to do is I want to take you through the process of a roller coaster, for those of you who have rode one before, and kind of the ups and the downs and the twists and the turns and everything that pertains to a roller coaster that I think absolutely applies to your relationships. And so really the first thing that when you decide, okay, I got my circle of friends, I got my crew, we at the amusement park, we're at Six Flags, we're gonna ride that ride. You get in line, you stand for 3 hours, you finally get to the front. If you got a fast pass, you're on it, you're wise, okay? And you get to the front, and the first thing you do when you get on the ride is you gotta commit to the ride. Write that down. Turn to the person next to you, say, commit to the ride. You got to commit to the ride. You can't be getting on there being like, I don't know, and it's starting to start, and you unbuckle your seatbelt. Ain't a good idea. You got to commit to the ride. This is why you never see people halfway through a roller coaster decide, you know what, I'm out, I'm going to jump off. Why? Because it'll be fatal. You know the truth I know about you and me? Oftentimes, we're not willing to commit to the ride in relationships. As soon as we get uncomfortable, as soon as we get nervous, as soon as we get scared, we jump off. And the truth is if that you're going to join this church and call this place home, if you're going to join a dream team, if you're going to start doing biblical community with people, the first thing you got to do is you got to commit to the ride. Yes, there's going to be moments you don't like. Yes, there's going to be things that happen that people who you don't really trust yet, or maybe you do trust and they love you and you love them. Of course, there's going to be moments you don't like. But you got to make the decision that I'm going to commit to the ride. And like if I've learned anything about this idea of relationships in 2020, as we go through stuff, I need those relationships. And what I've learned is that sometimes, like when you commit to the ride, you got to be willing to just roll with the punches. Now, for those of you who don't really know boxing or get in boxing, that's the idea that the hardest hits you experience in life are the ones you don't see coming. And so as a boxer, you learn to see the hit and you learn to roll with it so it don't hurt as bad. Some of y'all, I don't get it. Okay, I played football. Let me give you another example. When I joined the football team, the thing that I didn't do is that when I got tackled on the field, I didn't quit the team. Why? Because that's part of the game. For some of you, when you get in relationships, you want relationships, but as soon as you get hurt, you quit. Right? Like, that's part of the game. You're gonna get hurt, but you gotta decide to commit to the ride. Say, commit to the ride. Now, I'm not just making this up and making it sound good. This is exactly how the relationship between Jesus and Peter began. When Jesus has this first encounter with Peter in Matthew chapter 4, I want you to watch the commitment level from Peter to Jesus and Jesus to Peter. Here's what he said. Jesus called out to him, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And they left their nets at once and followed him. They left their nets at once and followed him. If you're gonna follow Jesus, you gotta commit to the ride. If you're gonna have godly relationships, you gotta commit to the ride. In order to follow Jesus, he had to leave his net, leave his business, leave his comfort. And for some of us, the reason we don't have a godly relationship with God and we don't have a godly relationship with people is because we're still trying to carry our nets around. And we just keep dragging and picking everything up, but we're trying to follow Jesus. You gotta leave your net. You gotta drop your net. And so you have to commit to the ride. Now, what happens in a roller coaster, every good roller coaster, after you commit to the ride, the first thing it does is it starts to go up, right? Tick, 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 tick. And all of a sudden, you find yourself on top. For some of you, that's the scariest moment. Because you look out and you're like, oh, there's my hotel way over there, right? And you're at a place in the sky you never thought you would be. For some of you, that's the part you love. I love that part, right? But like you're looking at it, you're like, I never thought I would be up here. Can I just tell you that if you're gonna have godly relationships, you need people who are gonna take you to a level you never thought you'd be at. You need people who are gonna encourage you. And so let me just say, if you start out a relationship and all of a sudden it doesn't start with an incline of encouragement, but instead starts with a decline, let me just tell you, that relationship might be going to hell. That relationship may not last long. I'm just being real today, right? Like, if you just get in a relationship, all of a sudden, it's just like from the get, boom, there it goes. You need to get off the ride quickly. Why? Because every good roller coaster, every good relationship starts with an incline of encouragement. It always starts with people speaking life over you. And the same thing happened with Jesus and Peter. When he had this encounter with him, he says something really interesting that it takes a little bit of a word study, but it's really practical because you see him from the very beginning saying this to him in John 1. It says, then Andrew brought Simon to meet Jesus. Looking intently in Simon, Jesus said, your name is Simon, son of John, but you will be called Cephas, which means Peter. Let me tell you why this is important. Because Simon, his name, Simon means wavering one. Peter means rock. What Jesus is doing in this first encounter is that Jesus saw him for who he is, but called him to who he became. He saw him and said, your name is Simon. That means wavering one. But I'm not just gonna see you for who you are right now. I'm gonna see you for who I've called you to be. You need some friends that not only look at your life and see who you are and what you've been through, but know who God has called you to become in the future. Like when they look at you, the power of life and death is in the tongue. What people speak over you matters. Their influence in your life matters. So when they see you and they see, you know what, you're not that committed right now. They're gonna be, hey, listen, I know you're not that committed right now. I know you got a problem with lying. I know you got a little problem with gossip. I'm hoping you ain't killing nobody. But let me just tell you now, I see who God's called you to be. And you may not feel like you're a good dad now, but I see that God is calling you to a good dad then. And you may not feel like a good mom now, but God is calling you to become a good mom then. Right? Like you speak to who people are becoming, not just where they've been. You need some people who are gonna help you and encourage you in life. So Jesus looks at Peter and he says, listen, your name is wavering one. But aren't you thankful that when Jesus saw he was the wavering one, he declared him as the rock, and on that rock, Jesus built the church, and here we are. Aren't you thankful that Jesus doesn't just define you and I by our mistakes and by our past? That he sees who he's called you to be and says, I want to help you become that person. So what happens on a roller coaster? You're up top, enjoying your views. You love it. You're ready. All of a sudden, you're just looking around. What happens next? The drop. The drop. That's the scariest part for me. It's the drop. It's like, uh-oh, is it gonna go off track? Listen, you gotta expect the drops of discouragements in your relationship. You gotta expect them. Because every relationship starts off well, but every relationship experiences drops. And you gotta know, like, there's gonna be drops of discouragement in your life. And you see this as you fast forward into the relationship between Jesus and Peter. What you see is this moment where Jesus is about to pray and go to the cross. He's about to pray in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he brings Peter, James, and John with him. And he says some things to him, and he tells them, listen, I'm gonna go over here and pray, and I want you to stay here, and I want you to watch for the next hour. While I'm gone, while I'm spending time with God, I want you to watch over me in the next hour. So it says this, sit here while I go over there to pray. He took Peter and Zebedee's two sons, James and John, became anguished and distressed, told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. He went on a little further, bowed with his face to the ground, praying, my Father, if it's possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me, yet not my will, but your will be done. So he tells them, watch out, stay awake, stay on guard. Here's what happens in verse 40. Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. You had one job. Somebody say, stay awake. One job. Just stay awake. And in this moment is a drop of disappointment in the relationship with Jesus and Peter and James and John. He had one job. Then he said to Peter, couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? But do you know what I love about Jesus? Jesus addresses the disappointment, but he doesn't end the relationship. Come on, somebody. That was for me too. That when he gets disappointed, he addresses it, but he doesn't abort it. And I think for some of us, like, this happened 2 more times, by the way. They fell asleep 2 more times. And Jesus still didn't give up to them. Some of us have been like, Peter, what's your name? Your name means rock. You need to kick rocks. Bye-bye. Right? Like, for some of us, we're like, you messed me. Hey, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, or fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, it ain't happening. Right? We're like, oh, you fool me, you out. Kick rocks, Peter, we gone. New relationship. Some of us got to learn how to commit to the ride. You're gonna have moments of discouragement. people are going to let you down. It's part of it. And so after the drop, what's coming next is the loops of lies and the turns of trust. They coming. So you make it through. You're like, okay, I addressed it. I didn't cancel them. Instead, I decided to commit to the ride. Now we're going, but guess what's going to happen? Some loops of lies are coming and some turns of trust are coming. There's going to be moments where the person you love the most, that loves you the most, they're going to lie to you. They're going to break trust with you. It is going to happen. Peter loved Jesus. He loved him, followed him, left everything, and still lied to him. Still broke his trust. And if Peter did that to Jesus, how many of you know it's going to happen to me and you? So you got to just beware. Look, there's some loops of lies coming. There's some turns of trust that are going to come. And we know that he loves them because right before this moment, right before they fall asleep, in Matthew 26, it says, Jesus tells him, he said, hey, by the end of the night, you're going to deny me. And he's like, no way. Peter says, even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you. Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, Peter. This very night before the rooster crows, you're going to deny me 3 times that you even know me. That's hurtful. You're going to deny me that you even know me. Can you imagine? This is the one who did life with Jesus, and Jesus like, you're going to act like you don't even know who I am. That'd be like me and Stu. And me be like, hey, Stu, you know Pastor Kody? He's like, I don't know him. Like, well, you take a lot of pictures with him. I take a lot of pictures of random people. I don't know him. Right? Like, that's hurtful. You don't just say, I don't know somebody. But he says, you're going to deny you even know me. You don't even know me. Peter's like, I'd never do it. There will be people in your life that will go, I would never do that to you. The truth is, because they're imperfect just like you, yes, they will. And so look, this is the next scene. After the moment, he gets betrayed. And all of a sudden, Jesus finishes his prayer, and the crowd comes up, and Judas is with him, and Judas betrays him. And then really something interesting happens, which I love it. So again, Jesus tells him, you're going to deny me? Peter's like, never. Watch what Peter, he's going to back up his word here. John 18, verse 10, 11. Then Simon Peter drew a sword and slashed off the right ear of Malchus, the high priest's slave. Jesus said to Peter, put your sword back into its sheath. What does Peter do? He's like, oh, you ain't taking Jesus? Bam, cut his ear off. Jesus is like, man, I'm sorry, Malchus. Here, go put your ear back on. Like, it's okay, right? Like, it's a roller coaster, right? So then at the very next moment, Jesus is betrayed, taken off to the high priest's house. Then the same Peter who cut off an ear for Jesus follows him to the priest's house and is standing outside talking to the gatekeeper, to the woman, and then watch what he does. The woman asks Peter, you're not one of that man's disciples, are you? No, he said, I'm not. He denied him. Denied he even knew him. This was the first time. Because it was cold, the household servants and the guards has made a fire. They stood around it, warming themselves, and Peter stood with them, warming himself as well. Now, I just want you to take a mental note. I'm going to come back to this if I got time. It's going to be like the dessert for the day. There's only 2 times in all of Scripture you see a charcoal fire. This is the first one. When Peter betrays Jesus, it said they built a charcoal fire, and Peter is standing around it as he betrays Jesus. And what I love is after this moment, Jesus still goes to the cross. Even when people disappointed him, even when Peter lied to him, even when Peter denied even knowing who he was, he still went to the cross for him, and he still goes to the cross for you, and he still goes to the cross for me. He knows how to finish with forgiveness. You and I need to have some relationships that know how to finish with forgiveness. After the turns, after those moments that leave you sick, that confuse you, we got to learn how to finish with forgiveness. And so what happens in the story is Jesus dies. He is buried. He resurrects from the grave, not only to forgive our sin, but to also reconcile us to God and each other. And then he begins to appear to his disciples for the next 40 days. And so what do Peter, James, and John do? What do they all do? They go back to the very thing they were doing before they followed Jesus. Isn't that what some of us do? When we quit on God and we quit on godly relationships, we'll find ourselves going back to the old way, back to the old thing. So here they are. They're out in the sea. They're fishing. And all of a sudden, they see this man walking on the shore. And John looks at Peter. He said, Peter, that's Jesus. He's like, ain't no way. He said, no, that's Jesus. Peter realizes it's Jesus, throws off his tunic and jumps in the water and starts swimming to Jesus. and gets to the shore and finds something very, very interesting. A charcoal fire. The only other time. The last time Peter was at a charcoal fire was the moment he betrayed Jesus. And now Jesus has set up this scene, this charcoal fire. And as Peter comes back and he sits down with him, Jesus made him breakfast. He cooked him some fish. He cooked him some fish tacos. And it says that he served him the fish tacos. Grace tastes like fish tacos. Do alliteration. Forgiveness tastes like fish tacos. What was Jesus doing in that moment? Peter, I know you denied me. I know the last time you sat around this fire, you betrayed, you denied even knowing who I was. But in this moment, even after I went to the cross and have resurrected from the grave, I'm gonna come back to you to let you know this is a different moment. And what I wanna know is, do you love me? You denied me 3 times. Now I'm gonna ask, Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord. Feed my lambs. Do you love me? Yes, Lord. Feed my sheep. Do you love me? Yes, Lord. And it says he was hurt. Why? Because Peter didn't even realize he lied to Jesus. But Jesus is saying, listen, who you are, the relationship you have with me is so much more important than the mistakes you made against me in the past. And I just need somebody to hear that today. Because you need some relationships in your life. You need to make a decision today that when things get tough, just like Jesus forgave you, you're gonna extend forgiveness to other people, and you gotta finish strong. At the end of the roller coaster, what happens? You go back into the same place you started. The only difference is you get out on the other side. And you keep moving. You go to the next roller coaster and you do it again. And what I learned is this past season, there is a confidence in knowing that if I made it through last year, I ain't afraid of this one. If I made it through those loops and those turns and those drops of discouragement and those people hurting me, but I'm still standing and I came out on the other side, I'm not afraid of what's to come in 2021. Right? So we gotta learn though, listen, we gotta learn to finish with forgiveness. Forgiveness is your job because Jesus forgave you. Peter asked him, how many times do I gotta forgive somebody? Jesus says, 70 times 7 per day. That's 490 times in a day. That's a lot of forgiveness. What's his point? You always forgive. Forgiveness is on you because you've been forgiven. So maybe the reason God brought you here today is because this is your charcoal fire moment. You turned your back on God, lied to him, denied you've even known him. And he's an all-knowing God. But what he wants to do is go, hey, I saw that, but that's not who you are. That's what you did. You're my child, and you're loved, and I want you to know there is forgiveness for you. So we receive it today. We receive the forgiveness of Jesus. Will you extend the forgiveness of Jesus? Like what would happen in your life, in your family, in the next generation, in this world, if we decided to forgive as Jesus forgave? Like what would happen this year if you decided, you know what, I'm gonna make sure that the circle of influence around me is calling me to my purpose, not reminding me of my past. You'd become who God created you to be. Don't neglect godly relationships. So who do you need in your life today so that your future self will thank you tomorrow? For some of you, it's saying, I need Jesus today. This is my charcoal fire moment. You are only one prayer away from experiencing the forgiveness and the grace of Jesus. He is available to you. So right now, I'd love to pray for all of us as we stand and as we sing this last song and just ask God to do a revival in our heart, in our city, in our world, but to start with us, to awaken us to who he is, awaken us to his forgiveness. And right now, what I want to do is I want to pray for you. And I want to pray specifically for those of you who this is your moment and you're saying yes to Jesus and you're asking him to forgive you for your sin and trusting him to carry you into your future. So right now, if you're believing that God is in this room and is doing something special, will you stretch your hand towards heaven and pray this out loud with me? Will you say, God, I love you. Today, I receive your forgiveness. Thank you for calling me friend. I believe you died on the cross for me. You rose from the grave so that I can be forgiven and set free. In Jesus' mighty name, amen and amen. Hey, put your hands together for everybody who made that decision today.